This morning I'm going to present just 4 arenas of these events: historical data, settlement data, monumental architecture, and then the issue of Jerusalem. Now, historical data in the 13th century, we have major shifts in the Eastern Mediterranean world. These are normally referred to as the 13th century collapse. Migrations, movements of people all over the Aegean world, the collapse of the Hittite Empire, the Egyptian New Kingdom collapsing, and part of that Egyptian New Kingdom collapse is migrations of people and historical changes and events. We see shifts in the New Kingdom. Ramses II, who I think is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, had his capital in the Delta. His New Kingdom economy collapses. I think it corresponds with a bunch of slaves moving out and removing his economic base. And then the next period of Egyptian history, we have his son, Merneptah, talking about a campaign he does in the southern Levant. And in this campaign, he mentions the people of Israel. And so the Egyptians knew in the 13th century that there was somebody called Israel. And so much so, I'll propose Israel is a small, nothing tribe at this time. So we can look at geographical movements. We can look at collapse of kingdoms. We can look at the history of the Eastern Mediterranean world. When we pull it all together, when we look at the text of Joshua and Judges, we see that there's major shifts going. And the biblical accounts fit the major shifts. So coming to the settlement data, in terms of the Iron One research, we have done a lot of studies, a lot of surveys, and so much so that we can almost document the demographic growth during the period of Joshua and Judges. And we can map out all these new settlements and these sites. And what we find is that there's this stark demographic shift at the end of the 13th century. An explosion of sites come up. People are now populating marginal areas where they weren't populating before. We can map this out, whether the number of sites or the built-up area of the site. And we can look at the different periods. In the Middle Bronze period, the histogram, and this is the period of the patriarchs. The Late Bronze Age, everybody leaves the southern Levant. We only have 29 sites. A little bit more, this is an older chart there. We found some more Late Bronze Age sites. But in this period, this is where I think the Egyptian sojourn was. Israel was in Egypt at this time. And then all of a sudden, in the Iron Age 1 period, we have an explosion of settlements. We go from 29 to about 250 sites. And now this graph is like 10 years old. We have over 300 sites. And granted, we probably have like 35 LB sites. But it's still the same picture, the same relationship between smaller sites, a smaller number of sites, and a large number of sites. And then after the settlement in the Iron Age 2, boom, it just takes off, and we have centralized authority. And so just the basic settlement patterns we see in the archaeological record fit the broad biblical picture. And we have a lot of these plans. And so as archaeologists, we can go out and look at 1200 to 1000 BC pictures of settlement plans. Iron Age 2, we have plans of major cities. These look like small tribal areas, patriarchal centers, different family units. And over here you have a city. Somebody's coming saying, nope, we have a drainage system, we have to build a palace. Here's how where you have to build your house. Notice this one unique one in the Iron Age 1. It doesn't fit the picture. It's well planned. It looks like somebody has, we have perpendicular streets, access roads. This is not an Israelite. This is a Philistine city. And so the biblical authors know that the Philistines were, I don't want to say more civilized, but they came with well-planned cities. They were already with a government structure. We have the 5 Philistine cities. They were organized where the Israelites were still tribal territories, and so they still built like tribes. And it wasn't until the Iron Age 2 period where you have somebody saying, nope, we're going to build our cities this way. That's evidence of centralized authority. Accounts that we see in the biblical text, tribal allotments, the land that remains, where people live, the various battles, the boundary descriptions, all the stuff we skip in our devotions. You know, this boundary went from A to B to B to C. All those represent geographical realities that are authentic. When you actually go to the land of Israel and you see where the hills and valleys are, they're matching up. So taking all this settlement data collectively as a whole, when we compare the Iron Age 1 and the Iron Age 2, the settlement process is evident that something happened in the 10th century. There's a major shift. There's a sociological, historical development that can only be attributed to a centralized state. And so this is what we as archaeologists refer to state formation. Evidence of state formation, evidence of some central authority telling you, you have to do this. And that's where biblical archaeologists are spending their time looking for evidence of the state. And this is where the debate happens. When I'm at conferences with other Israeli scholars, we're debating how a state looks.